welcome back to Push to Be More. My name is Matt Edmundson, and it is great to be with you as we jump into another journey and look at what really fuels life. So today I'm excited to be chatting with Arshad Hisham from InGen Dynamics. We're going to be diving into his unique life experiences, the hurdles he's had to push through, the way he recharges his batteries, and what does more look like? Push to be and more. That's what we're getting into. Now, don't forget, you can find all the detailed show notes, the complete transcript of our conversation are available on our website at pushtobemore.com. Pushtobemore.com, all one word. You'll find us there. But before we get into the conversation, let me just give a quick shout out to PodJunction, who sponsor this show. Now, if you're a regular to the show, you'll know this because PodJunction have sponsored every episode of this podcast so far. But basically, PodJunction is all about helping you set up and run your own podcast. Why would you want to do that? Well, if I'm totally frank and honest with you, my own personal marketing experience, podcasting is sensational. It really is. It's like nothing else I've seen. There's paid ads, there's paid media. We use those a lot in e-commerce. There's email marketing. There's all these things which are true and tried and tested and wonderful. But podcasting is something else, let me tell you. So if you want to understand more, if you want to find out more about why you should host a podcast, if you're in business, if you're a leader, if you're an entrepreneur, I really recommend you look into it genuinely, because it's going to open doors, it's going to create networks, it's going to introduce you to people that you've never met before, and you'll have some phenomenal conversations along the way. So check out more about that at podjunction.com if you want to know more about that. I even host a podcast with Sadaf, who heads up PodJunction. She produces this show. Sadaf and I do this podcast called PodJunction, ironically, where we talk about how to use podcasting to grow your business. So if you've not had enough of my voice, check out that podcast as well, PodJunction. It's a great intro into it all. So do find us on there. We would love to see you. Now, let's talk about Arshad. He is a powerhouse entrepreneur and CEO who turns big ideas into multi-million-dollar ventures and even sells them to billion-dollar giants. Love this. He's got a background spanning business engineering and an MBA. He founded InGen Dynamics, building an $80 million revenue pipeline and earning a Silver Edison Award along the way. From advising fast-rising AI startups to designing cutting-edge robotics, Arshad's impact is felt globally with features in Fortune, MIT, IEEE, and ASM. There's lots going on, isn't there? Arshad, welcome to the show, man. Arshad. It's great to have you on the show, man. How are we doing today?
All good, Matt. Pleasure to be on the show, and all good, and happy to dive into the show headlong. So look forward, and
Fantastic.
thank you for the kind words. Like your mind.
Well, it's all true. So it's the kind words, but true. Arshad, listen, let me ask you a question, right? Let's jump straight into it, because I always like to ask this of every guest we have on the show. I just think it's a really great question. I genuinely do. This show is sponsored by PodJunction. It gets you, up and running with podcasts. So if you did have your own podcast and you could have a guest on your show, you're going to chat to them like we're going to chat, and you could have anybody on from your past or the present throughout the whole space of time history, just someone that's had a really big influence on your life, who would be your guest and why?
I think it would be Isaac Asimov, who's been a major influence on me since I was growing up. So it would be Isaac Asimov, and I would be asking him questions regarding the direction in which the whole science, AI, automation, robotics, the whole world is headed, because he kind of saw all this on paper almost a century back.
Wow.
And I think, surprisingly predicted almost 30% of it accurately. So it will be very fascinating to dig deeper, and given what's happening now, I'd love to ask him some questions about the next 100 years.
Yeah, we would all love that insight. Where's it all going? We just don't know. But yeah, you're obviously into AI, you're into robotics. Just, proper science stuff here. Where do you think it's all going? Have you got I mean, I appreciate I'm asking the $1 million question here, but if you did have a crystal ball, where would you predict it's going to go, knowing what you know now?
I think as with all technologies, technology has driven societal progress and the human evolution throughout the centuries. I mean, if you look at how we have evolved as humans, it has always been tool driven, starting from the wheel, the fire, the industrial revolution, the steam engine. There's been tools at the center of it. Then the computers. So I think AI is the next tool, and it's going to be a hyper evolution this time because, unlike anything else you have seen uh, in our history, this is the first tool that can actually reason itself. Okay, which is kind of very, very
Yeah.
special if you think about it, right? So what are we kind of building? So I think we are in for a big ride, and we don't need to wait 100 years. We just need to wait 5 years, in my opinion, to see most of the impact. And this could go all the way to bioengineering. This could go all the way to, improving quality of life. This could go all the way to increasing the lifespan. And we can see all this happening in the next 5 years. So that's what is special about this revolution is that the speed at which it's accelerating is so fast. And we are in for a ride. At the same time, as with every new technology, there's been downside, there's been containment, there have been issues when new technology comes out of the box. So I think we need to look out for instances where this could potentially cause problem. How can we contain it? And if we see the history, not all of it has been great. I think if you look at the nuclear bomb, it has been largely contained. I mean, it was a major invention in the 40s, right? It's been almost like 80 years back, but it's been largely contained. I mean, there has been a consensus globally how to contain it. So maybe some part of this that comes out that is not pleasant and not ideal could be contained. So, but overall, I think it's a very promising and optimistic future. We're going to see a lot of progress in all the sciences. We're going to see a lot of free time. The quality of life is going to improve. And again, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an optimist. So that's how I usually think. So
I love it. I'm the same way, I'm very optimistic in life. But can I ask you, I mean, you obviously, you know a lot about this side of things and where it's all going. You can see the technology. Does it scare you in any way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It does. It does scare me a lot of from a lot of perspective, and seeing the pace at which it is developing. I think what we're creating is so powerful that we could be looking at in 5 to 10 years engineering atoms. We could be engineering new biological organisms, and this could all be available as kits in every home in 5 to 10 years time. So we'll have a material fabricator, just like 3D printing with the way things are developing in 5 to 10 years, you could 3D print literally anything at home.
Wow.
You won't need to purchase anything from the grocery store. So I think the impact it's going to have on society, the way we're used to living, is massive. And most of the governments, and this is what is really worrying me, is most of the governments are not ready, are not fully prepared. They're playing a reactive game. They're waiting for everything to hit to kind of respond. And I don't think that's the right strategy for this wave, because every previous wave, like the Industrial Revolution, the computers, internet, there's been time for government organizations to adapt, create rules, reskill labor. This time, there's no time. So I think we need to be more proactive, come up with mechanisms, incorporate all these tools in labor. From that perspective, definitely it's very scary. I don't think the world is fully prepared for what's coming. And from a second perspective, this could create so many side waves that nobody can predict what are the side effects it could create. And this is very hard. Nobody can predict what are the societal effects, what fragmentation can it create. You're going to have a small group of 10 people who are going to be super powerful, as powerful as a nation now in 5 to 10 years' time. How are you going to contain that? What do you have in place now to do that? And if you look at nations, I think one of the things with nations is that there is an implicit contract that you're given security from a nation, from a democratic nation to its citizens. So if smaller groups can get to this state with like 20 people with all these tools, what then happens to the contract between the nation and the citizens? So I think there are a lot of bigger questions in play here, which is really scary. And I think we're gonna see all that play out in the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow. And it's really interesting, isn't it? You talk about it from that side of things, because everybody talks about it from the Terminator point of view. You know, the robots get smart and they kill all the humans because humans are a virus, and you know, the Matrix, all the sci-fi movies, isn't it? Really, and in fact, you're a bit of a sci-fi fan yourself, I understand. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. But one thing I hate is a Terminator style depiction, because that's probably the most unlikely scenario that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's going to happen is a standard classic example. They call it the paperclip maximizer, which is really interesting. You create an AI or a robot and give it a task to make paperclips, and this thing's become very intelligent, very efficient, and it converts the whole world into a giant mass of paperclips, and it
Mm-hmm.
destroys everybody in the process. So that's the kind of scenario we need to be worried about. We're going to trigger an unintended fatal consequence through a general purpose specific AI. So that's how I think we should be worried. I mean, something turning sentient. And this is great for movies, but I think it's highly unlikely that will play out in real life.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? But it has. I think AI is one of those things. Like, it's got people excited, but it's also got people a little bit twitchy. And I'm intrigued because there seems to also be a generational thing that seems to be occurring. So there's a lot of people going, AI is exciting, it's scary, but I am not keeping up to date. I am sort of way out of it. And then there's a generation of people which are sort of fully embracing it, if you like. And I'm curious to see where it all goes, you know, and the impact on the economy, on jobs, on people's lives. I mean, I suppose where I'm more excited to see the impact is going to be in things like healthcare, you know, and medicine and those kind of things, where actually we can use machine learning and we can use AI to help us, you know, cure some of the most horrific diseases known to man. And you kind of think that's kind of interesting. Things like ChatGPT, I suppose, are a bit fun. You know, they kind of help you create a LinkedIn post. But it's one of those, the sort of where it's all going over the next 5 or 10 years, I think like you say, it's both very exciting and sort of a little bit, as we say in England, a little bit squeaky bum time, you know, a little bit scary.
Sure. And I think, yeah, that's an interesting analogy. And I think if you look back at all the previous generation, I think if you look at calculus and calculation, which is done by paper 3-4 generations back, and then we had calculators, and everybody said using the calculator is not good. And then came the scientific calculators, then came computers. And now it's AI, and we are telling our kids that don't use AI, that's not the right thing to do. So if you look back, it's the same thing. It's a new tool, and we are just discouraging our kids from using it, because that's going to be the standard. This is a new computer, right? So you can't, the cat is out of the box. You can put it back now.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, listen, Arshad, you've had a fairly interesting journey yourself. You know, I sort of reading through the information here. You moved around a lot as a kid. Your dad was involved in banking, I think it was, and that caused you to move around a little bit. You've got involved in robotics and AI, and sort of an entrepreneur along the way. Let me ask, what is perhaps the biggest challenge that you've faced so far in your life that you sort of come through?
I think it has to be my second company, where we went through a massive failure. It was catastrophic, you know, and that's my second company that didn't kind of come out, and you know, we had to kind of wind it down. So it was a very character building exercise.
Yeah.
To be honest, and I think you know, it put me grounded, and it also made me realize that sometimes things happen not as a consequence of you not putting in enough effort, you not being honest. Sometimes things doesn't work out, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's not your fault, right? And how do you kind of come out of it? So I think it's moments like that, circumstances like that. I think it actually builds your character, and I think you kind of understand what kind of person you are, right? Because I think it's easy when you're successful, things are going your way, you will have a lot of supporters. Everybody wants to be on the same boat. And I've seen that in my first company and the third and fourth companies, but things doesn't go your way. Everything is collapsing around you. And then you realize, how do you kind of come out of it? How do you keep, you know, how do you remain a sincere, good person, you know, and how do you remain true to your purpose? So this kind of tests you. And I think that was very, very intense. It put me through a lot of stress from a family perspective,
Yeah.
finances, and a lot of self-doubt. And so it was kind of the hardest thing I had to go through, without a doubt.
If you don't mind me asking, when was this?
This was in around 2012, 2013. It's probably around my second venture.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. There's something about that time of the year, or the time of the century, should I say, 2012, 2013. There's a lot of people I know went through quite hard times. I don't know, maybe there was just something going, or maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't know, but it's interesting you talk about how sometimes things just happen that are outside of your control, because I think when things do go wrong and we face things like what you called a catastrophic failure, knowing there is a lot of self-doubt. You mentioned, there's a lot of that introspection, isn't it? What have I done wrong? How did you wrestle with that? How did you deal? Did it take you a long time? Were you quite matter of fact about it early on, or was it a bit of a dark space for a while?
I think, I think I did have to work on me a lot. So I think, just like, this is what I tell people, that just like you do physical exercise for the body, you need exercise for the mind. So
Mm-hmm.
you need mechanisms, you need to exercise your mind, you need tools to kind of look inwards, you need to kind of look at you as a person detached, and and see how you react to different situations. And I think it took a lot of, and also understand that you need to live in the present, give your best, and don't worry about the outcome. Right? This is how I think you should drive it. Don't worry about the outcome and give it your best, and understand that things are outside your control. And in fact, I started reading a lot of the Stoic philosophies around that time, which is kind of very interesting. And I did find a lot of analogies over there,
Yeah,
which is useful. And even in fact, many of the religions and philosophies have similar threads. These are like used to train your mind. So I did struggle very, very deeply. And then I had to look into all these tools. I started taking care of my health. I started meditating. I started taking a break. I had all these mental frameworks. I started looking at the decisions I'm making from a very, very pragmatic perspective. So I had to
mm-hmm.
work a lot on myself. And this is very different. I came in uh, as a fairly accomplished person. I graduated top of the class, top of the engineering degree, got recruited to IBM, went into tier one MBA, worked in great companies. So I was intellectually fairly capable,
Mm.
but I was not emotionally and socially ready for the
Mm.
huge challenges. So that kind of taught me that this is also important, and you need to kind of train yourself how to come back, and also see all these failures as a step back. Detach yourself from the failure. I mean, the failure is a consequence of a lot of external factors. It doesn't reflect you as a person. So don't connect yourself with a company and connect yourself with a particular initiative, right? You need to detach yourself from that. And I think in a way, it also means that you need to detach your ego from the process. You need to have a
Yeah,
healthy ego, because a healthy ego is essential, especially for an entrepreneur, because otherwise you're not going to get anything done. But at the same time, you need to detach yourself from the negative side of it. So this is
yeah,
what, kind of I understood around the time. So yeah, I mean, I did do a lot of introspection training, and this is something else. I also advise a lot of new entrepreneurs, new professionals. I help them navigate these challenges because I can understand how difficult it can get.
sure.
So I think, and this is one of the reasons I was also attracted to the topics that you were covering on this, Matt. I thought it'd be a great way to give back to the community some of my experiences.
Yeah, fantastic. It's an interesting one, isn't it? We go through these things, don't we, Arshad, and we sort of face them. And at the time, they're painful and they're hard, and you wouldn't choose them. It's not like you sit there and go, "I just want my company to go under there. That'd be great. Thanks very much. Yeah, let's just do that." You're not looking for it, but it happens. And I think several years later, once you've come through it, quite often, my observation is, as humans, we have the ability to look back and go, I wouldn't have chose it, but I'm actually quite grateful that I came through it, because had I have not done that, I wouldn't. And you can see the path that you're on now because of where it went wrong. Is that true for you? Would that be a fair comment?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it did, and I think it's one of the reasons that people say take a lot of risks early on in your life, which I think should be followed. It's an advice that followed on because you can make a lot of mistakes and come back in your 20s and 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you should, because usually we do the opposite. We actually encourage the new generation to take into steady, safe jobs. Don't take any risk, which I think should be reversed. I think in the
Yeah.
first 10 years, you take crazy amount of risk, fail so many times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not good to hear, but actually if you think about it, that's the
Mm-hmm.
right advice you should be giving. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely, and this is something like even NVIDIA's Jensen Huang in a recent interview mentioned, I mean, he did mention somebody asked him what's the character trait of a good entrepreneur. And he mentioned in a very, very interesting way. He said that to be a good entrepreneur, I wish upon you great suffering for an extended period of time. That's the only way you'll build the skill set. And it's actually
Mm,
very true. If you think about all this experience everybody's gone through, there is no way you can learn this in the textbooks.
mm,
No way. Even I can coach a lot of people, but they're not going to understand it unless they go through it. So you need to
mm.
literally go through the process, as you mentioned. So I guess it's very right. You have to go through this process to get forged, and it kind of sets you up for future success.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great phrase, there's no testimony without a test. And I think there's, when you're going through these things, yes, you work hard to get out of them because you're not choosing them. But I think there's something about embracing it as you go through it and going, right, what can I learn here? What, so it's not a wasted thing. I think that's the other thing that I see, so, with entrepreneurs is sometimes they'll go through something, it's bad, and it causes them to quit full stop. They've got burnt. That's it. I'm out. And that's actually quite sad because you're like, what have I learned here? Let's not let this thing defeat me. What have I learned? What can I get out of this so that next time I come out just a little bit wiser, a little bit stronger? It's, let's not waste a good opportunity. So I liked your quote there. Yeah, I wish upon you great suffering. It's quite a fascinating idea. What does a risk look like to you then? So, we should tell people to take more risks when they're younger. And the reason I'm asking this, I just read a really interesting study about kids growing up in homes without fathers. So fatherless houses, fatherless households, or households with absent dads, depending on how you pronounce it. One of the things that they understand that is missing from households where dad's not there is the kids don't learn to take as much risk. On average, now I'm not being stereotypical, I'm just looking at the data and just seeing what it says. But there's something about dads teaching risk to their kids. I don't know if there's something you learned from your dad. I mean, you moved around a lot when you were a kid. I don't know if that taught you risk or what, but or adaptability probably is a good trait. But that kind of, I'm curious, what does risk look like for you? How do we take more risk? What is it?
I think, yeah, you did. It's a nice analogy you put in. I think usually and again, not to stereotype, but in every family, it's usually the dads who kind of push the kids beyond the comfort zone little by little, and
Yeah.
make them to rest. And this is how the thing has been. And I think risk is kind of being outside your comfort zone, being okay to fail, being okay to be embarrassed publicly in front of your siblings, in front of your family,
Mm-hmm.
and coming back again, knowing that it's okay, right? So that's what's most important.
Yeah.
So if somebody's gonna do that, are you gonna give support to that person? And are you gonna, if you have hypothetically a 20-year-old son or a daughter who's taking a risk and doing it, are you gonna support them when they come back and fail? Are you gonna say it's okay, then do again? It's absolutely fine. Which is something that I think generationally didn't exist a lot 20, 30 years
Yeah.
back. I think it was, again, these are like different generations. I think, our parents and, they're different generations. But I think that's what's more important. So we should encourage people to take risks, but we should also give them a safe space to take risk.
Yeah.
Right? There should not be any character assassination. There should not be any judgment post taking the risk. There should not be any finger pointing or you wasted your early 20 years. So this is what needs to be, and this is not just from an entrepreneur perspective. This is like general life skills, right? I
Yeah.
mean, whatever you want to do, if you go through that phase where you've experimented a lot and did all this, you turn out to be a better person, right? I think you're more empathetic. You understand the highs and lows. You connect with people, excuse me, better. So I think it's not just from an entrepreneur perspective, it builds good character, taking all this risk early on. And I think the role for the society, mentors, colleges, students, parents is to give a safe space for people to take that risk and not associate an failure with their identity, right? They should have the space to come back and, with a new identity. So this is, I think, what's more important.
That's such a powerful insight. And I think you're exactly right. I love listening to what you had to say, and this identity that goes alongside failure, and how, I don't know if it's the same in your part of the world. I don't know but certainly when I grew up, failure was associated with shame. You felt ashamed because you go to school, I have failed. That's not a good thing, right? We're using this grading system to tell you how good or bad you are compared to somebody. Oh, turns out you're rubbish. Oh, thanks very much. And so there's this sort of innate shame that I think comes with failure. And I think one of the things that entrepreneurs seem to be quite good at is reframing failure. So it's not shameful. Sure, it's not pleasant, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't define who I am. And actually it's a learning experience. And that intrigues me. That's something that I think I've noticed over the years is how different people respond or frame failure when something goes wrong in their head. How do they frame that? And you can see that how that impacts their lives going forward.
Yeah, I think there's a great point, and I think you ticked on a very, very powerful tool, even which I use a lot. I use a lot of these reframing situations to move forward. This is a very powerful tool mentally, and I would recommend this to a lot of people. This is also required when you don't have a lot of support around you. You need to reframe yourself too, and this is very powerful. And this is something and I was reading a TED Talk. I was listening to a TED Talk about resilience. And in fact, it says that the most powerful predictor of success is resilience, not social intelligence or emotional or raw intelligence, right? And they also talk about many successful people having something, they're called ha-has. And it's called high achiever, high adaptability. It's a combination of both.
Love that. Okay? Yep.
Yeah, it's called ha-ha. So this is what they call it. And, so this is kind of very, very important. And reframing your situation, seeing it from a new perspective is a very, very healthy thing to do. It's a great way to and I would highly recommend to people listening it, look into this process, understand how you can look into every setback and reframe and, rephrase and then kind of move forward. It's very powerful. Right. And I couldn't stress more, Matt. I think you hit upon a very, very powerful tool, which I've used personally, and I would recommend a lot to people who are trying to push the boundaries. And in fact, when you feel that there's nobody who's supporting you, nobody who understands you, nobody is kind of with you, you need to replace. And I think and that's a challenge with doing not only entrepreneurship. If you're doing something new and people around you doesn't understand, you need to be ready to be misunderstood for extended period of time. Yeah. So you need tools like this to kind of cope.
Yeah, that's so true. I was just this lunchtime, I was sat down with somebody, a very close friend of ours, live in London. Property prices in London are just, scary, astronomically big. And she was telling us about the landlord to the flat she's currently renting is thinking about selling up. And so the question is, well, could you buy it? And the instant answer is to dismiss it and go, well, no, because it's crazy money. So I said, well, let's how do you reframe this? So think about how could you do that? Rather than just assume that you can't, is there a way to sort of reframe this? And it's a really interesting discussion because you're right. I think it affects every area of life, doesn't it? And how you see things. And this, I wonder, I don't know if you're, I'm a big fan of gratitude journaling, because gratitude journaling reframes everything. It doesn't I think people misunderstand it sometimes because it's like, well, if I've got to be grateful, I've got to deny the pain or the aggravation or whatever that I'm going through, which I don't think is actually true. I think both can exist in tension. But gratitude journaling, for me, being grateful every day, I think is probably one of the biggest things that's had the biggest impact on my life. You know, it's easy to be negative, especially in England, because, you know, we're brilliant at being negative in England. But being grateful, I think, takes effort and it takes work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is another tool I use. And in fact, one thing I do every day morning, I wake up and I do a prayer in the morning and I meditate. And and this is, I tell this to a lot of people when they pray to God, you pray for things that you want. But why don't you just switch and pray for things that you're happy that you've got? So that's your gratitude journal for people who are religious, right? And use meditation in the morning, I meditate for 30 minutes. And one of the things is a gratitude. I list down the things that I've had. I mean, the fortunate things that I've had experience, and it kind of balances my day out. I start my day out in a very positive manner. So this is what I do first thing early on in the morning. And I think it's again very, very powerful because end of the day, you shouldn't start. I mean, this is a never-ending cycle, right? There's somebody with more money, more achievements. So
Yep.
this is never ending. So you're not gonna find happiness chasing, and it's not just money. This is reputation, even philanthropy. I mean, even people are competitive even in philanthropy, right? I mean, if you think about it, there are people who are kind of doing good, but even that has a yardstick. They measure how good you're doing, right? So I think having this gratitude, I don't have a journal, but I have a meditation in the morning where I kind of list down everything. And this is very, very important. And also stop comparing yourself to anybody else because your journey is your journey. It doesn't matter if the guy next door has $1 million, he has 2 cars, 3 cars, he's way ahead of you. It doesn't matter. He may have had a fantastic personal life. Your personal life was failed. It doesn't matter. So I think, you're on your own journey. You need to be grateful, And as Marcus Aurelius says, when you wake up in the morning, it's a great feeling to be alive. That's number one, right? That's the thing with gratitude. And I think, and I've read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's a great book. So I would recommend a lot of the old Stoic books, Letters from Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. These are like great books and way, way more powerful than a lot of the self-help books now, Matt. I think we can go back. A lot of this stress on gratitude, and even a lot of the religious texts and prayers stress on gratitude. So I think, this is kind of a very, very powerful tool in turn to keep you grounded. So absolutely.
Yeah, very true, very true. It's an intriguing one, isn't it? I listening to you talk. You've obviously gone through the mill, but you sort of got these foundations in life, Arshad, that you sort of, you implement, use with your prayers, your meditations, your gratitude, your introspection when it's needed, and so on and so forth. Can I ask, do you feel content? Are you content in life?
I would say yes. I mean, I think since the last 5 years, so this is a test I do, Matt. I always start the day and I think, if I'm going to drop dead end of the day, would I be okay? And I guess I am on most days. I'm fine. So if I kind of, God forbid, my life ends end of the day, I'm okay. I think I'm content with not what I've achieved as a person. I'm content with the journey I've taken, the risk I've taken. And, so I'm very, very content. Absolutely. And I think, but that doesn't prevent me from, so this is for me, like, I'm detached from the glory and the ego, but I'm pursuing this journey as a ritual rather, right? So, but I'm not attached to it. So tomorrow, if it all collapses, I'll come out of it unscathed. I'll start again from zero. I'll lose all my money. I lose all my professional credentials. I'll be very happy and I'll start again. And that's my superpower, man.
That's my superpower. It's such a good superpower.
Yeah.
But what it is for me, it's tied into a higher purpose, then, isn't it? So, if my purpose is to be a successful e-commerce entrepreneur and it all fades tomorrow, then I've lost my sense of purpose, and that I think is very dangerous, especially for men. I think men without purpose are very dangerous. But if your purpose is higher than that, so if my purpose is, to be, for example, a loving husband, well, irrespective of what happens with my e-commerce business, I can do that. And so I love hearing what you've got to say, because I do think it stems to understanding that there is something beyond the work. There is something beyond this sort of realm I operate in night and day, and go, no, there's something higher. And as long as I tie into that sense of purpose, that for me, I would call it the eternal purpose, that sort of sense of the divine, I suppose, without getting too religious. But if I connect into that, then yes, I think I can face anything, because I've got that high sense of purpose. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think another powerful tool that I use is that I stop expecting things or outcomes from people or situations. So I don't expect, even if love my kids, my wife, I do something for my dad, for my colleague, I expect nothing in return. And that kind of frees you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a prison we all get trapped into, right?
Yeah.
You expect people to behave with you in a different manner. You expect people to reciprocate. But if you take that out and you do your part as a duty, and you take the same approach to your work, and stop expecting somebody to applaud you and say that you're great, and even if people come out of the woodwork and criticize you, you're fine. So I think expectation is your prison, right? It imprisons you, because you're expecting, and then you become a slave to somebody else. You're letting somebody else and some other emotion control you, right? And then you become unhappy. And then you get into all these negative emotions like jealousy, revenge, anger. So I think, if you cut out expectations and you give unconditional support to anybody, people, business, you're a free man.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting one, isn't it? How does that work then in relate? Because I get that, in the sense that a lot of disappointment is just because of unmet expectations, right? I'm disappointed you didn't do ... and I've either not communicated or you've just not done it, and that expectation is not there. And so I get that. How does that work with your staff, though, or your team? Because obviously, I think as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, I have expectations of performance from my team, and I have standards which I try and achieve myself, I suppose, and hold myself accountable. I have expectations of myself. How do you balance the two things?
So this is a great question, because on one hand, I'm, as you can imagine, Matt, I'm a very, very demanding leader. Right? This is, otherwise I can't get anything done. What I'm doing is, I'm pretty tough to work with. But the key thing here is that none of my demands are personal. And my ego is detached from the whole process. So this is just a process that people can reciprocate. If somebody doesn't measure up, we figure out a way, but there's no way that I get angry on the person. There's no way that he gets upset. We try to move somebody to a different role. So it's a process. And I don't see that as somebody else's fault. I don't see as somebody else's has let me down. So I think you have detached yourself from the process. But at the same time, again, this goes back to applying your this is what I do my calling is to be this entrepreneur, do this day in and day out, and not expecting an outcome, but do my best and let people perform at their best. And sometimes people are going through their own struggles. So you need to kind of really understand, many times people fail not because they are kind of want to intentionally fail. They're going through a lot of stuff. They're not well suited. So there are multiple other reasons. So I do tend to apply this. But the key thing is that because of the way I'm thinking, it is not personal. It is very, very methodical. So I think, we go through separate steps. And there is always plan A, B, C, D, E. So there's always, we move people through that. But at the same time, me as a person, I keep moving the company forward. So that's where, for me, Matt, all these mental tools that I'm talking about is not an option. It is a necessity for me to do the things I'm doing with limited capital and everything. This is what I need to be. This is what my job demands me to be. Right. So, I think the balance is there. So this doesn't mean that as a CEO, I kind of let people do whatever they want and let it slide. That obviously doesn't work. But at the same time, key thing is detach yourself from the process, take your ego out from the process, and then relook at the scenarios. Have plan A, B, C, D, E, and support people when you need them to support. Be empathetic. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of a 2 cents. And this is a great question. This is a lot of people when they see the business side of me, they see how strong and pushy I am to get things done because I need to be, because you can't run a company like what I'm running if you're not clearly defined on your objectives and KPIs and everything, right? But that's a very different thing. So you should not confuse. It's like what they say, right? I mean, you can be a very, very calm, pleasant person, but you can get a lot of things get done professionally well.
Yeah.
You can be a very rude, serious person, but professionally you can be so backward. So this need not be connected, right? We don't need to have a correlation between this. So you can be you can be professionally very effective without being rude, without being pushy. So these are like that. I think the trick is to kind of find that balance of how you detach yourself from the process.
It's really interesting. It's a really interesting tension, isn't it? And figuring that out. And that comes down, I guess, to personal leadership style as well. You run your company the way you run that, because actually that's who you are. And if you try and lead a company like I lead a company, I don't think that would work for you, because we're a different person, we're a different style, we're a different way of approaching life. And that's okay. And I'm okay with that. And I can learn things from you and I can adapt them. But if I try and mirror you, I'm on a road heading south real quick. And so, and again, this is part of the journey, isn't it? It's understanding what works for me and how I best function in this entrepreneurial system. Have I got it all right? No, not at all. Am I enjoying the journey? Absolutely. I'm enjoying the journey, and I'm learning lots every day. It's been a fascinating thing. Arshad, listen, let me ask you, I'm aware of time. So let me ask you this. The question for Matt, this is a new thing we've started doing on the shows, where I ask my guests for a question. I'm going to take the question, I'm going to throw it out there on social media and answer that question. So what's your question for me?
I would like to ask you, Matt, all the people who you have interviewed, which answer, and all the questions you've asked, which answer surprised you the most and why?
Right. That's a big old question. I love that question, though. So if you want to hear me answer that question, just follow me on social media at Matt Edmundson, both on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I will post a video there at some point after I've scratched my head. It's gone, this is a really big, tough question, but thank you for that, Arshad. I appreciate that. Listen, how do people reach you? How do they connect with you if they want to do that? What's the best way to maybe just have a chat?
I have my own personal site at arshadhisham.com, and there is a contact me form. And usually, one thing I do, this a lot of people find it really surprising that I tend to personally respond to most messages coming in. So I try to respond in 2 to 3 days time. So if you reach out for anything, I'm happy to connect, set up a call, talk with you, and especially if you need advice, if you want me to connect, I'm very happy to do that. And if you want to look at the company, it's InGenDynamics.com, and we are on LinkedIn. So that's on the company. Again, I'm happy to respond. If you go to my personal website, put in your details on the form, glad to respond to any questions coming your way.
Fantastic. We will, of course, link to that said form and to the company and the LinkedIn pages in the show notes as well. So if you're just listening to this on your favorite podcast app, or if you're watching on YouTube, just scroll down in the description in the show notes. You'll find the links, hit the links and go say, how's it? Because it's always nice, actually, when people just go and say, hi, I just heard you on the show. It was great. I really enjoyed it. This is what I got out of it. And just connect with people. This is what we do as business leaders, isn't it? We network, we connect with people. So go say, how's it to Arshad. Arshad, listen, in closing, I guess one final question for you. What does more look like? In 5 years' time, what does more look like for you? Where will you be?
I think there is a very good Ralph Emerson quote, right, which says that if you manage to get the respect of intelligent people. If kids can listen to your story and be fascinated, and if your family and friends love what you're doing, you are successful. So that's my yardstick. I mean, and I would like to get there measure by measure, not by measuring anything I've done, but on a daily progress and a better version of me every day. I'm competing with myself. So that's my yardstick. If I can achieve that any day, I think that's success for me. And that's
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that. That is a great place to end. I love that. Arshad, listen, thanks for coming on the show, man. Really, really do appreciate that. I love these kind of chats because it's just good to shoot the breeze with other business leaders, with other entrepreneurs, see what they think and just feel refreshed and recharged. And so thank you for coming on. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. It's much appreciated. And it's lovely to meet you.
Likewise, Matt. Thank you for having me. Enjoy the conversation and really look forward to connecting in the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt we will definitely stay in touch. Well, as I said, we will link to Arshad's info in the show notes, which you can get for free along with the transcript at pushtobemore.com. But that's it. That's a wrap on another great conversation. Let me do this, actually. Hang on. My sound desk. Hang on. There we go. There we go. Love that. A massive round of applause. There we go for Arshad for joining us today. My little cheesy cheering on the old sound desk, which I've got now. But yeah, huge thanks again for coming on. Also, huge thanks to today's champion sponsor, PodJunction. For all you change makers out there contemplating podcasting as your new marketing tool, definitely check out what's going on at podjunction.com. You're really going to enjoy it, actually. The show's great. The podcast is great. What they do is great. Everyone's great. Just go check it out. Now, remember, keep pushing to be more. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts from, because we've got some more great conversations coming up. And I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, let me be the first. You, my friend, are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. Arshad has to bear it. I've got to bear it. You've got to bear it as well. Now, Push to Be More, as I said, is produced by PodJunction. For transcripts or show notes, swing to the website, pushtobemore.com. Big shout out to Josh Edmundson, who wrote this theme music. But from Arshad and from myself, thank you so much for joining us. Have an awesome week, wherever you are in the world. I'll catch you on the flip side. But until then, keep pushing, and bye for now.